Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the very first episode of the Sitting Duck, a Town of Duck podcast. My name is Kay Nickens, and I am the Public Information and Events Director for the Town of Duck, as well as the host of this podcast. I'd like to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for tuning in because, as you're aware, the Town of Duck has never had a podcast before, and if you're not aware, the Town of Duck has never had a podcast before. So this is a brand new project, a whole new endeavor, and we couldn't be more excited to be able to offer our community a new way to stay informed and engaged. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you are subscribed. Make sure your notification settings are turned on so that way you don't miss any episode that will be coming your way. Today we're sitting down with our town manager. He's going to tell us a little bit about how he fits into the overall big picture of governance in the Town of Duck. So again, thanks for being here. We have a lot of great content coming your way, and I hope that you enjoy what's to come. All right, so welcome, Drew Havens, and thanks for being with us as the Town of Duck embarks into the world of podcasting. This is going to be a new way for us to connect with anyone interested in the town, pretty much to give people an inside look at what happens of what goes into running a town and who the key players are, how things work, and what weaves the tapestry of the Town of Duck. So thanks for being here. You ready to get in?
I am. Thanks for having me, Kay.
All right, sure. So you've officially been with the town for 3 years. You have municipal experience in both Virginia and North Carolina, being a town manager in Virginia, Riverbend, North Carolina, and Apex, North Carolina, until you came here to Duck. However, before that, you have some experience in public safety as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'll back up just a little bit before public safety and just mention that in addition to my service as town manager, I also got into local government as a member of a local elected body, so the Board of Selectmen in my hometown of Thetford, Vermont. I served a term on that board. And then in terms of public safety, I started as a junior volunteer firefighter when I was 16 years old and did about 30 years in total as a volunteer firefighter and was an emergency medical technician and got into law enforcement in 1989 and served for 12 years.
Oh, wow. So when you were an elected official, were you a council member or a commissioner, mayor?
No, certainly not the mayor. Actually, we didn't have a mayor. So in Vermont and in some other New England states, it's they call the town hall form of government. So it's a board of selectmen that are elected to serve the community, similar to a town council, but you're called a selectman or a select person. But all the major votes happen not by the board or in our case here in Duck, the town council makes the decisions. In that form of government, the voters made the decisions. So we had an annual town meeting where everybody got together and discussed the issues. And if the town, say, wanted to buy a dump truck, it was on the ballot and people voted whether or not to buy a dump truck. So it's kind of a purer form of democracy versus a Republican, small r, Republican form of government here.
So speaking of the types of government, can you explain what type of government we have here in Duck?
Sure. So we are under the council manager form of government. Really, there are two general options in North Carolina, council manager and what they call mayor council. So the mayor council form of government, they may hire an administrator to handle some of the day-to-day functions. In our case, the board or the council hires a manager to really oversee all the day-to-day functions of the government, carry out their wishes. And the council really has two employees, typically. They have a manager and they have an attorney. And then from there, the manager's given the authority to staff the different departments and different functions of the town.
Oh, wow. So there you go, folks, a little bit about Government 101 here in Duck. But I do want to rewind a little bit more because something I didn't mention, you actually ran a business. And I think that it's really interesting to hear the perspective of your business career, because I think it gives you a great insight into transitioning into your role as a town manager. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of the things I've done in my background was I ran a real estate appraisal business. Started working for another gentleman and then transitioned to owning my own. It was the combination of owning a business and managing the functions of the business and the service in local government that really drew me to this career path, because I really was thinking there has to be a way that I can combine the two. And I really had no idea what a town manager was. And actually knocked on the door of a town manager's office in Vermont and asked him, say, what do you do? And that's literally how I started down this career path, was asking this guy, what do you do? And say, okay, that's what I want to do.
So that kind of answers where I wanted to go next, because it's, again, interesting how you have a career and you did some time with law enforcement and you went and knocked on a door and here you are. So with that transition, can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to, having a career in municipal government?
I think I've been focused on service, and I think that goes back to kind of my upbringing. Seeing my dad and my mom both involved in public safety, volunteer. So my dad was on the fire department. My mom was on the volunteer rescue squad. She had a background in nursing. So seeing that, and then just being involved in different community organizations, the Lions clubs and such, and seeing my parents involved in that really drew me to want to be in public service. So I think it was just a natural transition, really, going from the kind of the volunteer fire and EMS work, and then into being in law enforcement was actually, of course, every little kid, or most little kids, I guess, grew up thinking, I want to play, cops and robbers. I had no dreams about being a police officer. And one of those things that pretty much by accident stumbled into, but ended up really enjoying the service aspect of that.
So if someone were to come into town hall and knock on your door and say, what do you do? How would you answer that question?
Well, it's a mystery. No. So I think if someone's looking for a career or a position where everything is completely predictable, this is not the job they want. There's a lot of variety in what a manager does. And in the different communities I've served, there's been a different level of demand and a different set of skills that I needed to bring to each one of those. So it's been an interesting evolution. I think here, one of the things that we're blessed with here in Duck is we have really very dedicated, passionate, and intelligent people working for the town. So the last thing that the town would want, the citizens that we serve would want, is me to get in between the people that know what they're doing and what they're actually doing, and trying to direct every move they make every day. And I think hopefully as you hear from the other folks that I have the privilege of working with here, you'll hear that. And so, my time is spent, I work obviously directly for the council. So my job is to be sure that they get the information that they need to make the decisions. We don't tell them how to vote. We don't tell them what direction to take. We provide them information, the pros and the cons of all the different topics that they may bring up, and then answer any questions that they have. And then From there, because of the size of the local government we are here, I'm directly responsible really for the budget, preparing that document, presenting that to the council, and then kind of the management of the budget throughout the year. I'm very fortunate to have a really talented finance and HR person that handles the day-to-day kind of the money that's coming in, the money that's going out, to be sure that we have the duties are separated. So, and then it's project management. And again, it's not directly because we've got really good folks that do that. Sandy Cross, who I'm sure at some point you'll probably sit down with. Sandy's done an outstanding job of managing some of our major projects. And really, I go down the list of all 40 employees and tell you what they do. My job is just to be kind of between them and the elected officials and try to understand collectively what the council wants and then try to put that into action.
So on that note, you mentioned there are 40 employees for the town of Duck. So Duck is relatively small, and we're also relatively young. This town was incorporated in 2002. So we're just now 22. When you talk about having 40 employees, that really goes in hand with Duck being very small. And that's part of the charm. We have a very strong community sense of a Mayberry-esque type of destination here. So when you talk about being the person who's in between council and staff and really making sure that Duck stays what it is, how do you find that this Mayberry-esque idea affects your role as a town manager, or how does that play into the day-to-day as far as maintaining this very curated Duck experience that people have come to expect?
So it's interesting you use the word curated. So that actually comes out of our core values. So in one of the value statements in our SOAR value talks about the professionals that are working here for the town curating the Duck experience. So our role really is to listen to the elected leaders who are directly responsible to the voters. They provide direction in terms of a vision, and then in terms of strategic goals, and then they say, okay, how do we make this happen? It's really interesting to talk to the other folks that work for the town. And talking to professional colleagues of mine, one of the things I'll often say is they all get it. Whatever that it is, they get it. So we don't have to spend a whole lot of time trying to explain what Duck is and how we need to curate and preserve that to the people that are serving the community. Been very fortunate to get folks that get it and want to see that preserved. It's a very unique community. It really is.
It is. And I will just say for the record that we're very fortunate to have you at the helm, because it takes a special person to lead Duck in the direction that it's going. And for someone to come in, so seamlessly and get it. You can't really explain it until you feel it and you see it. So thank you for what you do. And I want to go back to answering the question about, if someone were to come and knock on your door and ask you what you do. Let's talk about the budget, because that is a big part of what you do. And we're also in the midst of budget season right now. And I'm not sure if people really grasp what goes into planning a budget, because truthfully, it's a year-round process. When people hear budget and they hear tax dollars, let's kind of talk about what that means for them. So can you maybe explain a little bit about what the core concepts are of a local budget, for local government budget? What are the main components of things like revenue, expenditures, projects, things like that?
Sure. I mean, at its core, a budget is a planning document. So it should be the document that guides for a year the efforts that are going to be undertaken to achieve the goals that have been set by the council, which in turn should be following along with the vision. So the goals should be leading to the vision. The budget is how we execute the goals. So it's it is a financial document, but really it's a plan. And I think if someone were to wade through the 200 and whatever pages of the budget, they would get a complete understanding of where the dollars come from and then where they go. And not only where they come from, where they go, but why they're going, where they're going. So hopefully the document does a little more than just lay out a couple of spreadsheets and say, this is where the money comes, this is where it goes. But at its core, it is that planning document, but really it is also a financial document. And so there's the income, so the revenues coming in and the expenditures going out. By law, we can't do what the federal government does. We can't have an unbalanced budget or a budget for a deficit. So by law, we need to have a balanced budget passed every year.
And when does that happen typically? What's the timeline for that type of process?
So again, set by state law in North Carolina. So our fiscal year runs July 1, June 30. So need to have the budget takes effect on July 1. And in our budget document, there's a graphic there that shows the budget timeline, and it's a circle. And it's intentionally a circle because it kind of feeds off of itself, and it does not stop. So July 1 begins what we call the implementation phase of the budget. The budget's been passed. It's now go forth and implement the plan that's been laid out for the year. Then there's the audit process that happens shortly after the fiscal year begins. We're auditing, again, by state law, we're required to have an independent professional audit of the prior fiscal year. So that's happening. By the time fall comes around, we're starting to look at our capital improvement plan. Our department directors are putting together project specifications to suggest for the capital improvement plan. And then really we get into the first of the calendar year. So 6 months before the new budget comes into effect. And we're already pretty deep into planning what we're going to present. We have a strategic goal session with the council, typically the first couple weeks of January. The middle of February, the council has a 2-day retreat where we're talking about some of the more major projects that the town's looking to undertake, and also looking at the status of projects that are ongoing in that fiscal year.
So after retreat, that's really when you start honing in on the projects that are priorities. So essentially, after the department directors give you these, what happens if there's not enough money for the projects that are requested? What happens to those things? How do you prioritize which projects take place and which ones get deferred to future fiscal years?
So really, the council does it through their strategic goal setting. So they're not, at that level of strategic goal setting, they're not saying, do this project, don't do that one. But as we're looking at what we call the gross needs of the organization, so all those projects, and then looking at the reality of revenue, and when they don't add up, we look at the council's goals and say, well, we can put these projects off to a future year because this particular project was higher in priority for the council. And they have an opportunity to reset some of that and to provide different points of steerage, particularly when we get to the mid-month meeting in April, when we have a workshop with the council. And I hesitate to call it a budget workshop because we bring it to them intentionally not balanced. We say, this is where we are. This is how far we've been able to get things. This is what we've had to sacrifice in order to get to even where we are today. And then we ask council, is there something we sacrificed that you didn't want us to? Or, is there something else we can sacrifice in order to get to a balanced budget? And we listen to their input on that.
And that's a great segue into input overall with the budget process, because we've talked a lot about what staff does, what department directors do, and how council has a role in this. But what about the community? What about the citizens? When do they have a chance to have their input? Because there's nothing worse than, after all of this is said and done and someone, being blindsided about elephant in the room, which is the tax increase. So how is it that citizens are able to provide input and have an opportunity to be involved in the budget process?
I would say the easiest way to be involved in the budget process is to be involved year-round. Understand what the challenges the community is facing are. Interact with the elected officials who are, to a person, very approachable and very open to hearing from the people that they're elected to serve. And there are different points of input, but there is a public comment period at the beginning of every town council meeting, the regular council meeting. We do have a required public hearing on the budget that happens in May. So that will be on the 1st of May. So council will hear any comments at that point. But there's also there's emails and contact information for members of council and for members of the staff that people can reach out if they have questions or suggestions.
Great. And that's something that I'm really hoping this podcast will be able to do is give people another way to be connected, because we want our small community to have that connection. So going back to the aforementioned tax increase in April, council did approve a 3-cent tax increase. So we actually didn't do a tax increase last year. This is our first one since
fiscal 22. So we're going into fiscal 25. So it's been 3 years. Yeah.
So 3 years since our last tax increase. And a lot of people might hear tax increase and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why? So let's break that down a little bit. And can you kind of go through what that means for our taxpayers and how it actually helps the town? Because, well, I'll let you do the rest of explaining that, because when you don't do a tax increase, sometimes it can have more of a detrimental effect compared to the other municipalities in Dare County.
Sure. And I think where I'll start in responding to that question is the tax increase is something that we don't take lightly. And it's actually almost at the point of the last resort. So if someone were to watch the budget workshop that we had in April, if they were to go on our YouTube channel, which, Kay, you've been doing a great job of getting the meetings up there. And hopefully people have been taking advantage of either watching on YouTube or watching it actually live. But the way that we present that budget, starting with, hey, this is how far out of balance we are, and this is what we had to sacrifice to get here. We spend a lot of time walking through the different sources of revenue that the town has. We walk through what projects are still remaining in that draft budget and what the different expenditure groupings are. So we group expenditures so we can keep a handle on that year to year, whether that be personnel or operations or capital or debt service. But we worked through that whole presentation and we were still out of balance. Really the only lever that the council has to pull in terms of revenue is the local real estate tax rate. And as mentioned, so it hasn't been raised in 3 years. What we pay for goods and services has continued to increase in cost, just like it has for my house and yours. So the effects of inflation are real on us as well. So, the fact that we haven't increased the real estate tax rate is really reflective of the fact that we've been receiving greater amounts of shared revenue. When talking about shared revenue, I'm talking about like the occupancy tax and the general sales tax that comes back to the town of Duck. Those have been really helping to mitigate against a tax rate increase because those have continued to rise year over year. We're not seeing, based on the state of the economy and other folks that have been out here working in Dare County a lot longer than I have, are really kind of in line with saying that we're not going to see that rate of increase or any increase at all. So because our shared revenues aren't increasing and our expenses are, we need to make up that revenue somewhere.
Right. Right. And as you mentioned, we do have the meetings on our YouTube, and the budget document as well as a 1-page kind of fact sheet is available too. So you do a really great job at breaking it down so people can, take bite-sized pieces of something that can be confusing and present it in a way that's accessible. So if you haven't looked at our website, make sure you do that, because all that information is listed there. So we are approaching the 20-minute mark. So I think this has been a really insightful conversation so far, but let's end it with a little bit of levity here. And with being a town manager and having all of the experience and, the resume of law enforcement and working in real estate and local government, what would you find the most rewarding thing about being a town manager?
I think what's been most rewarding to me in the 23 years I've been doing this in the different communities that you mentioned is seeing just a little bit of transformation and in each of those communities, and knowing that in some way I've had a small part to play in that. And I don't say that to be self-deprecating. I really mean that my part is just a piece. In none of the communities that I've served have I been the one that's gotten everything done. If you look at what's accomplished here in Duck, it's not the manager, whether it's me or my predecessor. It's not the manager that's getting it done. It's the folks that are working every day to do the work. I see my job as one of providing the resources through the budget, providing a resource in, if someone wants my opinion, they'll get it, providing a little bit of direction, and then as I can, providing some encouragement. As I mentioned earlier, we have really talented people here. So if I can just encourage them to use that talent, and I really believe in having decisions made where the information is. And I think that may be a little bit of change of mindset for some, but I really want all of our people that serve the community to make a decision. They know what the policies we're the governments. We have policies and procedures. So they know what the policies and procedures are, but let's figure out how to serve people and meet people's needs without a whole lot of red tape.
Thus, the podcast was born.
So this is a great example of it is, hey, podcast would be cool, wouldn't it, Kay?
Yep. And I'll say I was nervous. So this is exciting. It's uncharted territory, and I have a lot of ideas for this, and we'll kind of see where it goes and how it evolves over time. And thank you for encouraging this project. And I think it'll be great. I'm really hoping that when I see people walking on Duck Trail with their headphones on, that they're listening to our podcast, because what better way to get to know where you live or vacation, or if you're just driving through Duck, what better way to learn about where you are than to hear from the people who serve the town. So that being said, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being our inaugural guest. And
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kay.